Sir.
Both of you had exams.
Yes, sir. We
Sir,
both
we
are
are in
in
the
same
same
class.
class.
You're in the same class.
Yes.
Oh, so you are like, oh, but you never ganged up against me or any one of us in in these classes. You should, na? I'm giving you ideas. Okay, so you are classmates. So Omar joined the class for some time and then left in between to prepare. Abhinav, you did not join at all.
Yes, sir.
Good. Not good, but I hope it served the purpose. Your exams were good.
Yes, sir. It was easy, sir.
Then why did you miss the class?
Sir, exam was easy. I did not know that it will come easy.
Okay, so let's start. So we have started with Animal Kingdom, and I think someone who was present in the last class, Aisha and Mariam were there in the last class, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So would you like to? I'll share the screen, and would you like to just summarize for your fellow classmates what we did in the last class? It will be better instead you summarize than me summarizing. Who will do?
Let Mariam.
Mariam. She has passed on the baton to you already. Okay, Mariam. Would you
I'm
like
giving
to
this opportunity to my best friend, sir.
see how good of Aisha? Opportunities and academics should be taken, not given, is one thing. But okay. Mariam, would you like to summarize what we discussed about in brief? Just
Yes.
like briefly, because
We did Kingdom Animalia, and in that we learned the basis of classification. We started off from arrangement of cells or cellular organization, and then we moved on to symmetry of the body, and then coelom, which is cavity, body cavity, and then we moved on to types of systems, which there are respiratory system, digestive system, and circulatory system.
we have not touched upon systems yet. Okay, so don't worry.
Yes, sir. Um,
This was the main thing that you should explain. Can you see the screen, everyone?
yes, sir.
Yeah. Go on.
Now, according to level of organization, there are two types. First one is cellular level, and the second one is tissue, organ, and organ system. They come in one part. In cellular
Again,
level of organization.
We should also say that what is so on here, the level of organization, symmetry, and silo are the basis on which we are classifying. And Animalia is a kingdom. And as we move from left to right hand side, we are on the basis of certain characters trying to finally put everything in certain phylums. Okay, so this is what Mariam will explain now. Okay, go on, Mariam.
In Animalia, if we'll go first on the cellular level of organization, if we move on to symmetry, there are three types of symmetry. First is asymmetrical, second is radial, and third is bilateral. Radial and bilateral symmetry are usually in tissues or organ systems, and asymmetrical is only for porifera phylum.
It makes sense, right? Because if something has just cellular level of organization where nothing is forming tissues or organs and nothing is properly organized, then symmetry cannot occur, right? To make symmetry out of anything, you need organization. The first level of organization is tissue, where cells comes together to form a tissue. So that's why radial and bilateral is only possible tissue onwards. It's not possible for cellular level. Yes, Maria.
Then we move on to coelom. Porifera does not have a concept of coelomate or acylomate because it's again on cellular level organization. Therefore, it is only acoelomates. It is asymmetrical. And then we move on to tissue and organ systems. There are radial and bilateral. In radial, we have acoelomates, and now radial and acoelomates.
Acoelomates are which do not have any body cavity, and coelomates which have true body cavity, and pseudocoelomates which have a false body cavity. So yes, go on.
In radial and acoelomates, we have Coelenterata and
And
oh, sorry. We have Coelenterata and Ctenophora, and then again in bilateral acoelomates, we have Plathymethes. Sir, Plathymethes have false body cavity.
platyhelminthes have no body cavity. They are acoelomates. See, can you see on the screen here? They are acoelomates without a body cavity.
Yes, sir.
False body cavity is Aschelminthes, the pseudocoelomates in bilateral. And then we were discussing about coelomates, and I'll take over from here. Thank you, Mariam, for explanation. It was very good. So when we went to coelomates, and we have actually covered this part, but could not just write it. So I'll just complete it. So coelomates, which have true body cavity. So there are 5 phylums already without a coelom appearing, like without a true body cavity appearing. I'll just brush up quickly on true body cavity also, because some people were not present yesterday for their sake. So we have 5. So first phylum, which is Porifera, is neither coelomate nor symmetrical. It has no symmetry, no coelom. Then we went on to Cnidaria and Ctenophora. These 2 phylums do not have a coelom, but they have a symmetry, which is radial. Then the fourth one, Platyhelminthes, does not have a coelom, but have a bilateral symmetry. Then Aschelminthes have a bilateral symmetry and a pseudocoelom, like a false body cavity. And the true body cavity starts from the 6th phylum onwards, which is Annelids, in which comes your earthworms, and then arthropods, in which insects and spiders comes. And then the 8th one was, what was the 8th one? Mollusca, right? So in
Yes, sir.
Mollusca, your octopus and your snails, they come. Mollusk basically means soft-bodied organisms. So they have very soft body. They do not have bones, bony structures within. And then there was the 9th phylum, which was Echinodermata, right? The word echino means spine-like projections on the surface, and the word dermata is often used for the layer, the first layer or the skin. Comes from dermatologists. Have you heard dermatologists? The derm word comes from there. So echinoderms, your starfish come in echinoderms, as I told. If you have observed starfish, you will see that on the surface of starfish there are small spiny projections coming out, right? And Echinodermata is a special phylum because though it's put in bilateral symmetry, many echinoderms also show radial symmetry at some or the other stage of their life. Like starfish also shows radial symmetry. It also shows a bilateral symmetry. And after that, we had hemichordates. Hemichordates or hemichordata. The name of the example we'll discuss later, because Balanoglossus is one example, but you are not very familiar with the organism, so we'll discuss about it later. Hemi means half, and chordates means which are not complete chordates, but they have notochord at some or the other point in their life, so they are called hemichordates. And finally, the 11th phylum, the final phylum in animal kingdom, is the chordates or the chordata, in which everyone who has notochord comes, starting from your non-primates to primates, like cows, buffaloes, cats, dogs, chimpanzees, humans. Everyone come under chordates. Okay, so chimps, dogs, humans, they all come under chordates. Okay, so we'll learn about chordates also. So this was where we finished last time, and then we also talked about coelom, right? We have covered coelom. If I am
Yes,
so,
sir.
yes, so I'll just briefly go through coelom also. Try not to miss classes, because now onwards, because we are studying animal physiology and animal kingdom, things will get complex and complex with each class. And if you miss a class, it's like a chain in between. So if you miss a chain, a link in the chain, it will be difficult for you to connect the whole thing. Okay. So what do we mean by coelom is, it's called body cavity. You can ask for the recorded lecture from last class, and go into this detail. Just to summarize, I will say that body cavity is not the cavity which we canonically think. So when I ask where is the cavity in our body, intuitively we think that it is the stomach or our food pipe or the mouth cavity. That is not the cavity. That is just the cavity for our digestive system, because this is how our digestive system can work. But body cavity is anything. So there is one gut and there is a body wall. So if I draw a schematic of a human body, something like this, and for the sake of representation, I'm just drawing the gut straight. It is not very straight, but let's say this is the gut, the opening of the mouth, and then food enters, and intestines and everything are there, and then food exits from the anus. So there is a gut, and this is the body wall. Okay, so everything between the body wall and the gut, so this area, this actually is the body cavity where all our organs are situated. You understand? All our vital organs are present in the body cavity, our lungs, liver, pancreas, heart, everything. Is it clear for everyone?
Yes, sir.
So that is body cavity. And then we went on to discuss in the last class about the germ layers. There are three types of germinal layers or germ layers, as we say it. The first one is the ectoderm, which is the outermost layer as the embryo is dividing and forming complex structure. So it is not the layer of human body specifically. So do not think that whatever is outside, like our skin, is ectoderm. No, it's rather very counterintuitive, because our complete nervous system is made up of ectoderm. Our brain is made up of ectoderm, but it's not on the outside, it's in the inside, right? And then there is mesoderm, which is the middle layer. And then there is endoderm, which is the inner layer. Now endoderm and, I'm just summarizing, endoderm and ectoderm are two crucial layers that are present even in the less evolved organisms. And those who have just these two layers, ectoderm and endoderm, are called diploblastic, right? And three of your phylums, Ctenophora, Cnidaria, and what? Platyhelminthes, right? All these three are diploblastic. And in higher organisms, endoderm and ectoderm interact together to form the third layer, which is called mesoderm. And this is an important layer because organisms which have all these three layers are called triploblastic. The word blast means, blastic is just how it forms. So it forms through three layers. And this mesoderm is actually responsible for lining the coelom. So this mesoderm forms the coelom. So this is the connection, okay? So only organisms which are triploblastic can have a coelom. Diploblastic organisms cannot have a body cavity. Okay? This does not mean that in their body there is no empty space. There is empty space, but that is not called body cavity. Just like our mouth is an empty space, but it is not called body cavity. It's an oral cavity or buccal cavity. So diploblastic organisms only have two layers, and triploblastic have all these three layers, and everything after your annelid is a true, sorry, after your Aschelminthes, including Aschelminthes, is triploblastic. Now, the pseudocoelomate, the word pseudo, as you have seen that Aschelminthes here, they are pseudocoelomates. So in the pseudocoelomates, this mesoderm is present, but not present continuously. So this is present in pockets or patches. So wherever they are present, they will make a body cavity there, and then there'll be no body cavity somewhere. And then, so body cavity is present in pouches, irregular pouches. Such organisms are called pseudocoelomates, which do not have a true body cavity, which is continuous and uniform, but have a body cavity. Is it clear, everyone? Those, especially
Yes,
those
sir.
who are not present in the last class, Abhinav, Omar.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just the basics. Rehab, Nida, clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So let's start with today's class and let's build on this foundation and understand animal kingdom better. So today we'll be, I'll be telling you about two more concepts. So one thing is, write down. So one more concept which you're going to study is segmentation. Okay. Now, what about segmentation? What do we mean by segments? Segment is an easy word. It's an English word. What do you mean by segments?
Parts.
What parts? Segments are not just parts. Segments are identical or similar parts where each segment is same. That's why it's called a segment. Okay. So segmentation is a property of in living systems because many animals have a segmented body. Now, with a segmented body, I does not mean that the body is divided into parts. Every body is divided into one or the other parts, but all our parts are different, right? Our head is different from our thorax and our limbs are different from our legs. So a human body is not at all you can say it's divided into different parts, but you cannot say that the human body is segmented. Whereas if you see an earthworm, earthworm is an example of a segmented body. Have you seen an earthworm? So an
Yes, sir.
earthworm looks something like this. It's a long worm, but you will see that the body is divided into such lines. These are called segments. Okay. And what is special about these segments is that so there is repetition. So in each segment, there is repetition of at least some organs. So each segment is not unique. So their body is not divided into unique parts. Every part of their body, each segment has repetition of organs. Like if you see for earthworm does not have, and these segments are anatomical and morphological both. These are not just lines on the body. These are not like as I have drawn with the pen. They go very deep inside the body. And you can cut an earthworm. If you cut an earthworm from this segment onwards, and remove it, so it will lose certain organs which are present here, right? Is it right? Make sense? Any body you cut, so the part that is out of the body now, so the main body axis loses that organ, right? But this does not happen in case of earthworm because earthworm have repetitive organs in each segment. So let's say about the brain. So earthworm does not have a brain. It has ganglions. And there is a set of ganglions present in many segments. So this segment will have one ganglion. This segment will have one ganglion. And many ganglions will be there present. Similar like kidneys. The kidney is not single unit which is present in one segment. It is repetitive units present in multiple segments. Same thing about testes and ovaries. Okay. They are also present in multiple segments. So even if earthworm, you cut an earthworm from here, you cannot see that, you cannot say that because the earthworm has lost its head part, it must also have lost its brain. No, because the brain is itself divided into subparts and present in multiple segments. So that is called a segmented body. Is it clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
So write down segmented body or segmentation means that the body is morphologically and anatomically. The word morphologically means externally, like which you can see, and anatomically, which means internally in terms of organs, etc. So morphologically and anatomically divided into segments, with a repetition of some organs, Now these segmentations with the repetition of some organs. Everyone has finished writing?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's come back. So these segments are formed differently in different organisms. Okay, so for earthworm, you have to remember, because it's important, it is asked, the segmentation, the type of segmentation is called metameric segments. Specifically for earthworm, it is called metameric segment. For other organisms which are segmented, it may or may not be metameric, it may be other type of segmentation. But the concept of the whole fundamental of segmentation is same, that you make certain parts of the body which are repetitive, and they are also repetitive morphologically and anatomically, like certain organs are also repetitive. And for earthworm, it is says that earthworm undergoes metamerism to form a metameric segmented body. Okay, so this is the concept of segmentation. Clear, everyone? Any doubts?
No, sir.
No. Next is write down notochord. What was notochord? We discussed notochord. Just like coelom, let's discuss this also here so that you are through with the concept. So a notochord is basically mesodermally derived. As I told you, mesoderm, right? What does mesoderm forms? Mesoderm lines
Body
the
cavity.
body cavity. It does not makes the body cavity, because nothing can make a cavity. Cavity is an empty space. You do not need anything to make an empty space, right? But you need something to line that space. So there should be a line defining that, just like a boundary. So that boundary is made up of mesoderm, but internal, the cavity is a cavity, right? And the same mesoderm which lines for the coelom or the body cavity also makes notochord. So write down notochord is derived from mesoderm. Notochord is derived. Whenever we use the word derived, it means that it comes from the tissue which is mesoderm, and then it's differentiated developmentally to form a notochord. So it is derived from mesoderm and is a rod-like structure. Is a rod-like structure formed on the dorsal side. Formed on the dorsal side of an embryo. So it forms during embryogenesis. Okay, so we always study about notochord from embryonic perspective. Okay, it is also present in fully developed organisms, but since it forms in embryo, we always study it from that concept. So it's derived from mesoderm. It's a rod-like structure and is present on the dorsal side. Now, do you know what is dorsal side and what is ventral side? So there are certain terms: dorsal, ventral, lateral, anterior, posterior. How many of you have problem understanding these terms biologically? Just say me or yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's discuss that for some time. So it's on the dorsal side of an embryo. Everyone is finished writing? Now
Yes,
write
sir.
down animals that contain notochord. Animals with notochord are called chordates. The word chord is there. They are called chordates. So every organism that have a notochord is called a chordate. And animals which do not contain it are called non-chordates. It's obvious. Okay. So Porifera to echinoderms. Every phylum is a non-chordate. Clear? If you'll go back to the table and remember that table, like just photocopy that table in your memory, because I will refer to that table a lot of times to make you understand how phylums work. So when we talk about chordates and non-chordates, everything above hemichordates, which is from Porifera to echinoderms, all are non-chordates. They do not have a notochord, okay, on their dorsal side. Clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let's come to dorsal, ventral. I'll give you some shorthands to remember it. So normally there are few terms: dorsal, ventral, posterior, anterior, and lateral. These are body axis when we talk about. Dorsal is one thing where if that organism is a chordate, so wherever the notochord is present or wherever the spine is present, spinal cord, notochord or spinal cord, or your vertebral column is present, that is the dorsal side. So for a cow, dorsal is on the top. Okay, that's facing the sky. Understood, everyone?
Yes, sir.
And ventral is where our most of our, like, opposite to the spine, where our organs are situated. That is called ventral. So for a cow, the ventral is which is facing the ground. For a dog, for a cat, everyone. And it holds true for all organisms which have 4 appendages or any number of appendages. So when there is one general rule that I remember it, like, it's not written in books, but remember that if an organism have 6 number of appendages or 4 number of appendages, then the organism should be all the appendages when they are touching the ground. So for human to find where is dorsal and where is ventral, you need to make a human stand in a way where all the 4 appendages, which are hands and legs, that's why I'm not using the word legs only, appendages. All the 4 appendages should touch the ground. So if you do that, how babies walk, right? With all 4 appendages on the ground, then their back is towards the up. So whatever is facing up is dorsal side. Will you remember this?
Yes,
Same is
sir.
true for a cow, same is true for a cat, same is true for a spider or any insect. For a cockroach, what is the dorsal side? The way cockroach moves. So normally it moves with all the 6 appendages on the ground. So whatever is on the top facing the sky is dorsal. Remember?
yes, sir.
Cool.
Yes.
Yes. And the opposite is ventral. So dorsal and ventral goes together. Okay. Now anterior and posterior. Any confusion with dorsal and ventral for any organism?
No, sir.
No. So what will be the dorsal for a snake? Snake does not have any appendages. But snake does move, right?
Yes, sir. So the upper side.
So when the snake is moving with the full body in contact with the ground, if they do not have appendages, their full body should be in contact with the ground. Okay. And when it is moving, then whatever is facing the sky is the
Dorsal.
dorsal side. And the one which is facing the ground is the ventral side. Because many snakes like king cobra can also stand erect. Like they can just stand erect as a defense mechanism, right? So they have a body axis which is perpendicular to the ground. In that case, it's difficult to, like, you can tell it, but I'm just saying it conceptually that that is not the way when dorsal and ventral is decided. The snake has to be in contact with the
लाइट
ground.
चली गई लैपटॉप बंद हो गया यार
Oh, that's a problem. Who was that? Aisha. Oh, she's there.
I'm sorry sir actually light went
I understand it. It's an issue in Bihar. Can you continue with the class, Aisha?
yes sir I took
Okay.
the phone
Okay, fine. So you understand what is dorsal and ventral for every organism? You will not be confused with any organism.
Yes, sir.
What
Yes.
will be the dorsal and ventral for a starfish? Who will tell?
Dorsal will be the upper part
When? How? What kind of upper?
when all its appendages is on the ground.
Yes. So starfish do not have appendages. What you see as the star hands are not the appendages. You know, they are the body axis. So naturally, it has to be touching the ground. So naturally, whenever an organism touches the ground, you can also, you know, flip the starfish. It's not like you flip the starfish over and say, now this is dorsal because it's facing up. It's you have done. Naturally, starfish rests because on the ventral side, they have a mouth. Okay. They have an opening in the center through which they eat. So in nature, however the organism settles on the ground, then you can say whatever is facing up is the dorsal. Clear, everyone? Cool.
Yes, sir.
Let's go to posterior and anterior quickly. Now for posterior and anterior, there are two ways how people say you to understand it. Textbooks say that anterior is the part which is towards the head and posterior is the tail. Okay. You can also remember it through A. So A is the first alphabet in the series. Okay. So A is the first, that's why head, it becomes the head. Head is the first. And tail is the posterior. Okay. So anterior is towards head and posterior is towards tail. But for some organisms, head and tail concept does not matter. Like in earthworm, just we discussed above. There is no head and no tail. Have you seen an earthworm in real life? If you see an earthworm in
yes
real life,
sir I have seen in India there are so many earthworms
Yes, in India we have a lot of biodiversity. That's the best thing. So if an earthworm is moving in this direction, let's say this earthworm, and you touch here or you obstruct it from here, it does not take a U-turn. Earthworms never take U-turns. It will just start moving in this direction, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And many organisms are like that, especially insects. Insects which are cylindrical and worms and lives in burrows in the ground. So when earthworm goes into the ground, it makes a hole which is just almost equal to its own body size. It's like a train in the tunnel. It cannot take a U-turn to come back. So it goes inside and it comes out. Okay. So here, looking at the earthworm from outside, you cannot tell without anatomical features where you know that where are the ganglions present. You cannot tell that which is the head or which is the tail of the earthworm very easily. You can tell it. People who study earthworm can tell it, because on the head side they have a proboscis through which they eat the food. But sometimes it's not very easy to distinguish. So how will we decide head and tail then? Then there is no concept of head and tail. So there we cannot rely on morphological features and we have to go to anatomical features. And this is where higher concepts comes in. Anterior is towards head or posterior is towards tail, where it's distinguishable. But if it is not distinguishable, anterior is where most of the sensory organs or sensory receptors are present. When I say sensory, I mean decision-making sensory. The central nervous system is present if it has. Like most of the ganglions or decision-making neurons are present on the anterior side for any organism. Okay. An anterior side is the side which an organism always put forward when it is exploring an unknown environment. So when a human go to explore a new environment, suppose I ask you to go and explore a new room, you will face towards the room, right? Right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now for humans, because we are bipedal, we stand on 2 foot. So where is the anterior? This is the anterior, because now we cannot decide on the basis of our motion or this on the basis of because we do not have tail, but most of our sensory organ, our brain is present here. So this is our anterior and our foot is the posterior. You can also say that our lips are posterior to our nose and our chin is posterior to our lips. Is it clear, everyone? It's just like the concept of north, south, east, west. Okay. Lateral, on the other hand, is just, it's like whatever is coming out of the body, main body axis, the central body axis is called lateral. Like humans have all their appendages lateral to the body axis. So this is our body axis and we have an appendage which is, so if I draw the body axis again, we have an appendage which is here, you know, which can go like this. You understand? This is the body axis, it can go perpendicular to this. So this is the lateral. But if you see the same kind of appendages in a cow or a buffalo, they do not have lateral appendages, you know, because it's in the frame of the body axis. If you make a cow stand like a human, you will always see that the hands are coming from here, like out of the plane. So if this is the cow, the hands are like this. You understand?
Yes.
That's why it stands, it walks like this. But for humans, if this is a human, the hands are like this. We can do this with our hands. We can also bring it forward and we can also do up and down. Cows can just do this. Cows cannot do this very effectively. Do you understand? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the lateral is anything which is on the sides of the body axis. So if you're looking the body axis from the side, this is the lateral view. Okay. Our ears are lateral to our nose. Make sense, everyone? So this is the lateral. Dorsal, sorry, anterior, posterior, lateral. This is ventral and this is dorsal. Taking the example of a human head. Everyone is clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
No confusion from now onwards. Okay. So I'll be using terms like lateral tail clip. I'll be using terms like ventral nerve cord. So will you be able to associate immediately. If you are not, just tell me there only, okay? But never get confused, because questions in exams will also come like this. Which organism has a dorsal ventral cord or dorsoventral? If I use the word like dorsoventral, where dorsal and ventral is clubbed together, it means running from dorsal to ventral. So if I'm saying dorsoventral nerve, which means that something is moving from the back or from the dorsal side towards the ventral side. So how it will be arranged? Let's take an example of a human head. If an arrow hits me dorsoventrally, from where it will hit me? In the head. So it will, so this is then arrow. If it is hitting me dorsoventrally, it will hit me like this. You know, if you see it like this, so because it's coming from dorsal to ventral, it's hitting like this. It's making clear? Dorsoventral.
Yes, sir.
If I say something is hitting something anterior posterior, then the arrow is hitting me like this from the top to bottom, because it's coming from anterior and going towards posterior. Okay. So if I say make a cross section.
Sir, excuse me, I'm sorry, sir, but can I join tomorrow or when the light will come? I don't know when the light will come. It's really dark here and I'm not able to study.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Okay. So if I ask you, or if I tell you that make a cross section, so we'll be doing it a lot in human physiology. So a cross section of the liver, a dorsoventral cross section of any organ, which means you have to cut the organ starting from dorsal side, starting from dorsal side to ventral side, right? You have to cut like this. You understand?
Yes, sir.
And if I say cut a anterior posterior, then you're cutting it like this. The slices are being made like this from anterior to posterior manner. Okay. Now let's go to our phylum. So we have started with phylums. Let's start with our first phylum, which is the phylum Porifera. And I already told you to study something about the phylums because they are just paragraphs given. So have you studied phylums? At least the few phylums. The first phylum is Porifera.
Yes, sir.
So all the organisms belonging to Porifera are called poriferans. And poriferans do not have any kind of symmetry, as we all know. And they are just bunch of cells living together in a multicellular organization. So the organism, when you look it from outside, looks multicellular and is multicellular. It is true multicellularity also, where they do not form any tissue. So every cell is just together in a bunch, but every cell takes care of its own nutrition, excretion, respiration, and everything. Okay. The organism does not rely on a tissue or any higher mode of organization. So write down. This phylum is commonly known as sponges. So we'll just quickly go through the important points. Because all these sponges are in this phylum, they are commonly known as sponges. And they are the most primitive multicellular organisms. Because when multicellularity arose, the meaning of multicellularity was that now one cell is not living independently alone. It's living with another cell. So the first kind of organisms which were multicellular were sponges, where single cells club together, grow as one organism, take care of it as one organism, defend itself as one organism, but still there is no tissue level. The level is still of each and individual cells, but they are together. Okay, they are joined together. And when I say joined together, they cannot be just loose. They have a loose aggregation, but there must be something which is binding them together, right? Otherwise, what is the difference between a colony of bacteria and a sponge? A bacterial colony also is multiple cells living together, right? Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And a sponge is also multiple cells living together. But in sponges, there is one specific feature because of which we also put it in Animalia. All our tissues, how are they bound together? What is the binding factor in our body, which is binding everything together? The glue. It's called collagen. So there are collagen fibers which are present in every animal body. And if any organism has collagen fibers, it is an animal. It is not a plant, not a fungi, nothing. It's an animal. That's one characteristic feature of being an animal. And poriferans or sponges qualify for this feature. So write down, they have collagen fibers binding them together. And they are generally marine organisms. Now, what do I mean by when I say marine?
Sea and ocean.
Yeah, salty water. So they are mainly marine organisms. And they have, because they do not have any tissue or system level, like organ system level, but they have one system which is not made up of like specialized cells, but it is just the way cells are lined up together. So it is called, they have a water transport system, or it's also called a water canal system. So write down, they have a water canal system. Just like a sponge. If you will see a sponge, do you have sponge in your homes? Like the artificial sponge will also work. The way we make sponge also is dependent on is derived from these sponges. So they have holes, right? And these holes go inside the architecture of the body and they just move randomly anywhere. So these are like small burrows. So if you put a worm in a sponge, the worm may think that it is the home of the worm. It will go into that holes and will start living there, right? And these hole-like networks form a canal system through which water moves in. Now, I told you that each cell has to take care of its own nutrition. No other cell will prepare food for it and distribute to it. So because they do not have circulatory system or any other systems. So for every cell to fulfill its need, resource should reach every cell, right? If you just take multiple cells and put it together, then there'll be certain cells which are present in the center, right? Which are not exposed to the environment because all the other cells are covering it. Just like we make a human pyramid or any pyramid. So when you make a pyramid, multiple blocks comes together, but the blocks which are at the center, are they exposed to sunlight, heat or anything? Are they? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I'm saying the innermost members of a pyramid or a tightly closed system of cells, mass of cells, the innermost cells will not be exposed to anything, no nutrition, nothing, right?
Yes, sir.
That's why these water canal systems are important for sponges, because it allows the marine water to reach each and every corner of the sponge. So sponge actually is kind of living in the system only. So water is seeping inside it and going everywhere. And each and every cell is directly dumping its excreta into the water and taking nutrition from the water. Everyone clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And for this water canal system to happen, let's just make a sponge. So sponges do not have any shape. So let's say this is a sponge. And you will see that there are small holes on sponge. These holes are also indicative on this cartoon, SpongeBob SquarePants, right? And these holes go all through inside. Water enters in and out from these holes, and these holes are called ostia. Write down. These minute pores on the surface of sponges through which water enters, it's called ostia. And then in the center of the sponge, somewhere, if I just cut it, I'm making
Can you
a
repeat the previous line?
yeah, sure. Minute holes or pores on the surface of the sponge through which water enters and exits are called ostia. And in the center, like this is the outer covering. If you just slice it, if I slice it from here, and if I make you see the side look, so this is the side one. So I'm making a slice and I have rotated it. Do you understand? Made the
Yes,
slice
sir.
and rotated it. So you will see that in the center, there is a big cavity. In this cavity, water stays for some time. And all the cells get a chance to do the exchange of nutrients and waste. And that cavity is called spongiocele. Again, coelom word comes from here, but it is not a coelom. So it's called spongiocele. Central cavity. It's not a body cavity, just a central cavity of sponge. So it's called spongiocele. Spongiocoelom also you can say. So ostia, and sometimes in some sponges which are more evolved from the primitive ones, water enters from one pore and exits from another. So there is a channelized way. Sometimes water enters and exits from the same pore, then it's ostia. If there is a different mechanism for entering of the water, because the water which is entering contains nutrients and the water which is exiting mostly contains wastes, right? So if this is available, then the pores from which water enters is called ostia, and the pores from which water exits, I forgot, it's called osculum. Okay, ostia and osculum, but they are again pores, minute pores. Okay, so water enters through ostia, goes into the spongiocele, stays there for some time, exchange happens, and then exits from osculum. This is how sponge functions. Is it clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this water canal system, this is asked, what all functions water canal systems helps in? So water canal system helps in respiration. So the respiration of sponge, because they are also taking in dissolved oxygen from the water and giving out carbon dioxide, because they are animal cells, right? And they have to do respiration. So it helps for respiration. It helps for nutrition, because food is also gathered through that way. And what it can also help as excretory system, right? Excretory, excretion. So respiration, nutrition, excretion, and transport. Okay, so all these functions are carried out through water canal system in sponges. There are something. Okay, write down one more line. There are something called collar cells in sponges. One special type of cells called collar cells. Now these are present in almost all sponges, and these are the only type of cells which have which show some kind of specialization, which are different from other cells. Otherwise, all other cells are same in sponges. But these collar cells are also called choanocytes. Now, cytes means cells, right? Everyone can relate.
Yes,
Sir.
sir.
So choanocytes or collar cells, write down. Question also comes on this. They are the cells which line the spongiocele. So cells which are present here, lining this spongiocele. What was lining the coelom?
Mesoderm.
Mesoderm. What is lining the spongiocele?
Collar
Choanocytes. Collar cells or choanocytes, right? They line the write down. They line the spongiocele and the canals. So all the central cavity and all the canals which come out of it. So if you make a sponge, it looks something like this. Not very straight. It can also be like this, but there are certain canals going. You know what does canal means? Canal simply means any tributary cut out from the main thing is a canal. For irrigation, we make canals, and you must have heard or read canal from that perspective, right?
Yes, sir.
There is a canal coming out of a river. So there's a river going, and the places which are far apart from the river, how do they get water? So you cut a canal from there. and some water follows there. So that is called a canal system. Okay. So all these canals are also covered by choanocytes. So collar cells line the spongiocele and the canals. And that's all. They help in a lot of things that you don't have to. Okay, so don't worry about what they help. Okay, just write down one point. They help in efficient functioning of the water canal system. They help in efficient functioning of the water canal system. So they are dedicated in some manner. They are like monitors. So in every class there are students and there are few monitors, 1 or 2 or 5, few monitors depending on the strength. So monitors are also like normal students. It's not like they are not studying in that class. They study in the class, do everything, but apart from that, they have another responsibility, right? Which is to take care of the discipline of the class. Make sense? So these collar cells are simply like monitors, which are actually also independent, and they also study and take care of themselves and their grades, but they also are lining something and takes care of the efficiency of water canal system. Then write down, what about digestive system? No one asked. So respiration is taken care, nutrition, excretion, transport, but there's nothing to digest, right? So they don't have a digestive system. So every cell has to take care of their own digestion. So whatever you take from the water, you digest it in your own cell. So you cannot take something which is bigger than you or bigger than the channels which can allow something into the cell. So write down, digestion is intracellular. This is asked, and it's obvious. Digestion is intracellular. What do we mean by intra and inter? What does the word intra means? Okay, write down in biology, the word intra, even in English, it means within. What? Yes, Reba? And inter means between. Your school must be having two kinds of competitions, intra-school competition and inter-school competition. In inter-school competitions, it is between two schools, right? Inter, between school
Yes, sir.
A and
Yes,
school
sir.
B. Intra-school is between, it may be between houses, right? But within the same school. So within the same school, there are different set of groups of competitors, maybe different sections, different classes, different houses, but intra is within the same school. Now, even if it is within the same school, it is between something, right? So intra school can also be said inter-house competition. Make sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So digestion is intracellular, which means within the cell, within each cell, their digestion happens. Now, since they are animals and they are sponges and they are very squishy, wishy, spongy, does not mean that they do not have a skeleton. You know, every animal must be having a kind of a skeleton, whether it is internal, endoskeleton, or exoskeleton, right? And their skeleton, write down, is made up of spongin fibers. Spongin fibers. Okay. I told you collagen fibers, they bind all these things together. They are also a part of spongin fibers, but spongin fibers specifically is the word used for their skeleton. Or we also use another word called spicules. Spicules, if I'm not wrong. Spicules, it must be. Spongin fibers or spicules make the skeleton of sponges. Okay. And sponges, because they are animals and all animals have concept of sex. I told you that there is a male and a female concept that arise from plants and animals, right? Before that, there was no concept of male and a female.
Yes.
So sexes, the concept of sexes and the concept of gametes arise from animals or are very visibly can be observed in animals. In sponges, the sexes are not separate. They are present in the same body. Okay, but there are two different sexes. There are two different kind of gametes formed if they reproduce sexually. So write down sexes in sponges are not separate, and those organisms in which there is no separate sex and both the sexes are present in the same body are called hermaphrodite. Hermaphrodite. Hermaphrodite means both the male and the female sexes are present in the same body. So you cannot say that the body is male or female. You have to distinguish between different organs within that body. Earthworm is also hermaphrodite. Earthworms have both testes and ovaries in their body. Okay, both the sexes are present in the same body. So all earthworms are hermaphrodite. Which means eggs and sperms are produced by the same body, right?
Yes, sir.
Which also means that if they make sperms also and eggs also, their own sperms can fertilize their own eggs,
Yes, sir.
right? But I have a question. In that case, is it a sexual reproduction?
Hmm.
Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
How? The same body is making sperms with the same DNA and making eggs with the same DNA and fusing
Sir,
it together.
because
Two
Sir,
connected
because
to
sexual
the-
reproduction can be defined as the fusion of two gametes. It's not that two different organisms should be there.
Right. So it still will be called sexual reproduction. But I was asking, will there be variation also? Will genetic variation arise?
No, sir.
Because same parent is producing egg also and sperm also. Will there be genetic variation?
No, sir.
Think about it again. I told you about a concept of recombination, which happens in meiosis during the gamete formation. Remember? I just briefly told you that when we make gametes, there is a process called recombination through which many characters which was not present in the father or in the mother may show up in the kid. Remember now?
Yes, sir.
Curly black hair of the father,
sir.
straight blonde hair of the mother. The child can have curly and blonde hair also. Because during the process of making gametes, we are making some permutation combinations. So there can be variations, but not much because the gamete and the both the gametes are coming from the same parent. Okay, so most of the time that variation will be very less and only be seen in kind of characters which are controlled by multiple genes. If they are controlled by two genes, then there will be no variation for those kind of characters. So often we say that for hermaphrodite organisms, there is almost no or less variations when they use their own sperms to fertilize their own eggs. But there is still a chance. Mutation is another reason because of which variation can come. But organisms which use their own sperm to fertilize their own eggs are called self-fertilizers or self-fertilization. Self-fertilization is not preferred by organisms if conditions are favorable. It is only preferred when you have no other option. Hermaphrodite can do self-fertilization, but it is very interesting to know that most of the hermaphrodites wait for a partner. Even if they have both testes and ovaries and they are capable of doing it by their own, they still wait for a partner. They find a partner and do something which is called cross-fertilization, in which they will exchange their gametes. The gamete which is motile most of the time is exchanged the most. So each partner will exchange its gamete to the other partner. And every partner will fertilize its own egg with other partner's gametes. That is called cross-fertilization. Because this is in true sense a sexual reproduction and will also produce lots of variations, right? So chances of forming variations is more in cross-fertilization than in self-fertilization. Agree?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
But organisms show self-fertilization under conditions where the partner is not available, or if they are living in open seas and waters where they have to move a lot and find the partner. If they can find it, they will go for cross-fertilization. If not, they can do it by themselves. So that is the concept of hermaphrodite. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Now, if they are hermaphrodites, they are also the type of reproduction. So write down about sponges. They can reproduce asexually. And when I say asexually, I do not mean self-fertilization. It is still sexual reproduction. Asexually means they can reproduce by fragmentation. You cut a sponge and break it into two different parts. Both the parts will grow to become new sponges because they don't have to do much, right? What they have to do? They just have to increase the number of cells and grow bigger. That's all. And they have to make a canal system, of course, and make a spongocele, right? So it's easy for them to reproduce asexually through fragmentation, right? And the sexual reproduction is through gametes. Everyone clear?
Yes, sir.
Now, let me tell you one more thing. From now onwards, whenever we will study reproduction, we will also study development. When we reproduce after the reproduction, after the fertilization, what is the course of development? Because all organisms do not develop the same. For some organisms like human, the baby which comes out of the mother looks like the adult human, right? They have similar features, everything smaller in size, small fingers, small hands, but all the features are there, right? It's not like they grow something when they grow old, like there was no nose and then nose came up. Everything was there. But for other organisms like butterfly, the babies do not look like butterfly at all. They look like worms. They are caterpillars. Agree? And caterpillar has to go through a lot of different kind of stages to become a butterfly. Agree?
Yes, sir.
So that is called, there is a direct development and there is an indirect development. Indirect development happen through stages. Each stage is important. So for indirect development, an organism give rise to an egg. A larva comes out of an egg, and that larva becomes a cocoon, and in that cocoon grows a butterfly which cuts out the cocoon and grow out. Make sense? That is called indirect development. So in sponges, write down, the development is indirect. Sorry. Also, before development, what is the fertilization? Yeah. So fertilization in animals can be of two types, internal, external. Internal means the fusion of gametes is taking place within the body. External means it is taking outside the body. Make sense? So if a fertilization is happening outside the body, then the female has to give the eggs outside, right? And the males have to also give the sperms outside. So there is no penetration in any form. This happen in fish. Have you seen fishes? So what fish do is, fish swim very close to each other. So let's say this is one fish, which is a female fish, and there is a male fish. Okay, so they will start swimming very close to each other and for some time. And the male fish, most of the times what it does is to just tell the female that he's ready to mate, it tries biting the female at the fin. So that is called their courtship behavior. Every organism shows a courtship behavior. That is very interesting behavior that is studied in biology. So by constant biting at the pectoral fin, the female fish sometimes gets into this signal that, okay, we are ready to mate. And the female releases lots of eggs in the water around. Again, these eggs are very tiny eggs which can float in the water for some time. And in a very coordinated manner, the male also releases all sperms in the same water like area. So as female starts releasing eggs, male starts releasing all the sperms, and the sperms meet the eggs in the water, in the open water, not inside the female's body. Do you understand this?
Yes, sir.
That is called an external fertilization. Okay. In an internal fertilization, the male body deposits the sperm inside the female body, okay, by penetrating the female body, and then the sperm moves into the female body and reaches the egg, which is placed at a specific point, specific site in the female body, and then fertilizes the ovum there. and the development starts internally. So the baby or the embryo starts developing inside the body. Whereas in this case, the embryo starts developing outside, you know, in a layer, in a packed layer. Is it clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
So for sponges, the fertilization is internal. And if the fertilization is internal, it means that the sperm of one sponge is reaching inside the body of another sponge. And how it is reaching inside, which system it is using, the same canal system through which water was reaching inside. Okay. And there is a internal fertilization, and the development is indirect. So sponge does not give rise to new sponges. They give rise to a larval stage. So there is a larval stage in sponge, and the larval stage in any organism looks very different from the adult. So you can just write down the larval stage looks different from adult. So there is an indirect development in sponges. There is an internal fertilization, and this is all comes under sexual, okay, or asexual both. Like fertilization come under sexual, development comes under asexual, or sexual both. But when we talk about indirect development, it's only related to sexual, because if they are reproducing asexually, there is no larva formed, okay, because they are simply breaking down and making new sponges. So when you break sponge into two pieces, they still are sponges, right? They look similar. They are not larva. But when you do sexual reproduction in sponges, and when they fertilize and develop, they develop from a larval stage. Is it clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so remember it. Okay, from now onwards, for every phylum in animal, we have to study reproduction, the type of fertilization, and the type of development as well. Okay. And of course, examples are important. Some famous examples that are like most common examples that are used is spongilla. Spongilla is found in fresh water. Okay, it's a freshwater sponge. It's also found in rivers. Sometimes you will found in rivers these sponges. They look yellow, brown, all sorts. People in earlier times, when sponges die, their structure remains. So they are dead basically because of pollution or water, or their age is done. They're dead, but they're still like a sponge. So they can be used for bathing purposes. So in earlier times, people used to collect these spongilla and use it to scrub their bodies. Just like now we get artificial loofahs and other things, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And there is also something called U sponge, which is called true sponge because it is still used as a bathing sponge. U sponge, it's commonly known as true. You remember eukaryote, true karyote?
Yes, sir.
U
Yes.
sponge is true sponge. See, terminology always plays its part. And it's called bathing sponge. And one thing which you should remember is U sponge is gifted as wedding gifts in Japan to the newlywed couple. I don't know what they're trying to say. They're trying to say, okay, so you should take bath more often because you're going to live with someone. You know, take care of your hygiene. But it's a tradition there to gift U sponges to newlywed couples. Okay, that is also has been asked one time in NEET. So U sponge, true sponge, remember it, and they are called bathing sponges, the ones which we still use for bathing. Apart from that, there is another one which is called Saifa. It's two names, Saifa and Saicon. I'm not very sure which is scientific name and which is common name. Just make sure of it. But Saifa is known as Saicon, or Saicon is known as Saifa. And this is also asked. Okay, this is also a sponge. Just figure out which is the scientific name, will you? I'm not sure if Saicon is the scientific name or Saifa is the scientific name. Will you do it for me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So this is, I think, all that you have to study about sponges or the Porifera phylum. Nothing more is asked or you should know. Okay, so let's move to another next phylum, which is your phylum Cnidaria. So it's your phylum 2, which is Cnidaria. Cnidaria or cnidarians are also known as Coelenterata. Okay. Sometimes in books they are referred as Coelenterata. They are same thing, not different. Now again, write down some very basic points. First point is they are aquatic. They are all aquatic. They live in water. Okay. And they are mostly marine. There are some freshwater species, but mostly marine. And they have radial symmetry, right? Remember, radial symmetry started from here
Yes, sir.
in the above graph that we made. So they have radial symmetry, and they are free swimming. So they swim freely. They do not live in colonies like sponges. They are free swimming organisms, and they have radial symmetry. And the important thing is the name Cnidaria. Okay, so the name Cnidaria comes from the name Cnidoblasts. This is the most important thing. Cnidoblasts are special cells. So write down. Cnidoblasts are cells, so they are also called cnidocytes. Now remember, the word cyte is for cells. Now if I tell you the word cnido means, the word cnido means stinging. What does cnidocytes or cnidoblasts are? Can someone tell me? Easy?
Stinging cells.
Yes, they are also known as commonly as stinging cells. And if you are thinking that they stink, you are right. They sting. They are the defense mechanism. They are called stinging cells. And within that stinging cells, within that cnidocytes, the thing which stings actually is a capsule, which is called stinging capsule. So this cell looks like, let's say the cell is like this, and within the cell there will be a very pointy capsule. Okay, so this capsule will just come out and sting you and go back. Have you seen these blood glucose testers? There are things, small machines which come to check your blood glucose.
Yes, sir.
They just sting your tip of the finger and a small drop of blood is drawn. Am I audible, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Just 1 second. I think something else. Okay, you can still see the screen. Everyone can see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I was telling about these stinging things. So they sting, there's some kind of a needle that comes out, stings and goes back, right? In that tester kit. So these are like that. So it is used for defense mechanism. If you try to touch these cnidocytes or cnidoblasts, or you try to capture these organisms, they sting you. Okay, and this stinging cell has a stinging capsule, I was writing, and that stinging capsule is called nematocyst. Nematocysts are the capsules. So nematocysts are present inside cnidocytes. They are stinging capsules and they are stinging cells. Will you remember it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And these organisms have tentacles. So where to place them? Now, a very easy way to do so is, if you have seen, what should be the more common example? If you have seen a sea anemone? A sea anemone in any Discovery documentary or
Yes, sir.
something? Sea anemones are those sea creatures along with these clownfish look. Have you seen these animation movies, Finding Nemo, like this, fish movies?
Yes,
So
sir.
these fish always live around these kind of organisms. So there is an organism which has so many of tentacles like this, right? And within these tentacles, these fish live. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So you must have seen cartoon characters of fishes coming out of something like these tentacles and going there back. Is it making sense to you?
Yes, sir.
So these organisms are called sea anemones, or commonly they are also known as sea flowers because they look like flower, but this is not their scientific name. And some fish live in a symbiotic relationship with them, mutual relationship. Now, if it is a symbiotic mutual relationship, both must be getting some kind of benefit from it, right? What are these small fish getting benefited as?
Shelter.
They're getting protection and shelter because no one will come and try to eat them passing the sea anemone, because at the top and at the boundary of these tentacles there are these stinging cells. So these cnidocytes are present on these tentacles. So if you come close to sea anemone, it will give you a sting, and sometimes it's poisonous also, or it's carrying some kind of thing which is irritant, to just like a bee sting. Then why they are not stinging these fish? These fish are coming and living inside these tentacles. They are not stinging the fish because they also must be getting some benefit, right? What is the benefit a sea anemone is getting from the fish? What do you think? What can you think? Just think logically.
Nutrition. Transport.
Nature works on logic. No, for nutrition, I think sea anemone is sufficient. It is getting nutrition from the water. It is living in water, so water is flowing. It is getting nutrition. What else can you think of? Why are you allowing something to live with you amidst your stinging cells? You are not stinging them. They must be doing something, right? They must be cleaning you, because you cannot clean yourself. If something get deposited in your openings or around your tentacles, you cannot clean it yourself, right?
Yes, sir.
So these fish eat the debris around the sea anemone and keep the sea anemone healthy, away from infections, and clean it regularly. Have you seen sometimes crocodiles or alligators, when they are sunbathing, they keep their mouth open and sunbathe, and small birds come and sit in the open jaw and they don't close the jaw? Have you seen this behavior of crocodiles on Discovery? So the world is fascinating. The natural world is fascinating. So crocodiles keep their mouth open and they are bathing in the sun, and there are small birds which come and sit in the mouth of the crocodile, and they are eating from the remnants from around the tooth, around the teeth. They are basically cleaning. They are getting a mouth cleaning done. And if they eat these birds, no bird will ever come and clean their mouth, and there are chances of them getting, so they eat flesh most of the time, and those flesh can stay like stuck between the teeth and can cause it can rot and cause infections, right? So they clean it. Okay, so this way a lot of predatory organisms also allow some smaller organisms to serve them. So they are getting, the birds are getting food, and the crocodile is getting a cleaning service done. Similarly, a sea anemone is getting cleaning done, and the fish is getting shelter and protection. So sea anemone is a ctenophora, is a coelenterata or cnidaria, which has stinging cells in its tentacles. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now write down ctenophora. Now also remember that ctenophora also has a radial symmetry. Like ctenophora has a radial symmetry, and they also have tissue level of organization. They can start from tissues, right? Remember, go back to your chart and look at it. So write down, they have tissue level of organization. And what are they in terms of germ layers? Are they diploblastic and triploblastic? Please keep your microphones on and speak. What are cnidarians? Diploblastic or triploblastic? Go back to your chart. Remember I told you they are diploblastic. That's why they do not have a body cavity.
Yes, sir.
But that doesn't mean that they do not have a cavity. They have cavities in their body, but that is not body cavity. So they are diploblastic, but they have a, write down, gastrovascular cavity. They have a gastrovascular cavity. And that gastrovascular cavity means, so if you see this organism, this is a sea anemone. It has a cavity in the center, opening in the center, and then there is a cavity in the body here in the center. Okay, so food comes through this and it's digested here. Okay, and that single opening of the gastrovascular cavity is called hypostome. So they just have a mouth. Like in humans, we have an inlet to our gastrovascular cavity. So we also have a gastro cavity, right? We have a stomach. The word gastro is related to stomach, and the word vascular is related to circulatory system. Remember that. Gastritis. What is gastritis? Now you can tell me. In normal terms, we say that older people say that they got a gas issue. That is called gastritis. What is gastritis? Gastro means stomach. So what is gastritis? Itis means speak, people. You slept or what? Everyone slept.
Inflammation.
Yes. Itis means inflammation. So gastritis means stomach inflammation, because of which lots of acidic gas is produced, right? We have acid in our stomach.
Yes, sir.
And if you produce acid more, acid is volatile. It will form gastric, like it will become gaseous. And then you have problem of gastric problems, which are called gastritis. Vascular is related to blood vessel. So we have a blood vascular system. Humans have a different vascular system and a different gastric system. Cnidarians have a clubbed system, which is called gastrovascular system. They use the same cavity for transportation and the same cavity for nutrition as well. Okay, and there is only one opening at the, so that is also, so that opening serves as the mouth also, and it also serves as the anus. So they get in food, digest it, and they also excrete out waste material from the same opening, which is called hypostome. Hypostome. It's the single opening of the gastrovascular cavity of the cnidarians. Now, if you have a cavity, which means you can digest something in that cavity, right? So what will be digestion like? Now, do you need to digest within each and every cell?
No.
No. You have a cavity where you can bring in lots of food, raw food, and secrete something inside is because you have tissue level of organization. So your cells can become specialized to do something. And then you secrete some enzymes, digest it in the cavity, and transport it to every cell of the body, right? So write down digestion is extracellular, outside of the cell. In our body also digestion is extracellular. It is inside the stomach. We digest food in the stomach, and then that digested food is absorbed in the blood and sent to each cell. So digestion is extracellular. Now, what? Do you know coral reefs? Corals? Do you know corals? What are corals?
Yes, sir.
They are very colorful, stony substances. We all used to think that they are stones, they are non-living. How many of you know that corals are living substances? And corals are actually cnidarians. Coral reefs. Corals are living substances, okay?
Yes.
Yes. So corals are cnidarians, and they are special cnidarians. All of them do not sting, okay? You can touch the corals, some corals. And they are, but still they are cnidarians because of other features. And they have a, write down, they have a skeleton. They have a skeleton. It's an exoskeleton. That's why they look like stones, because their skeleton is made up of calcium carbonate. Okay, so when they die, they become stiff because that calcium carbonate layer on the top is just like our bones. So if you see a human skeleton, it is dead, right? Are our bones dead? The bones which we have inside, are they dead or are they living? Yes, Abhinav.
They are living.
They are living. How are they living?
Sir, bone marrow is inside there, no sir.
Okay, but any other feature that tells that they are living?
No.
No, there are. Bone mends itself. When you break your
there are.
bone, it mends back. If it was non-living and if there is a break in the bone, you can never mend the bone back, right? Bone grows also. Have you seen outgrowths of the bone? Some people have something growing, cyst-like thing growing out from the bone,
Yes, sir.
which is treated then. Extra calcium deposition. So bones are living when they are inside a living system. Only when we die and everything around it, which is providing it with nutrition and substances, is no longer available. Excuse me. Then bones also die. And when they die, they become stiff and solid and more harder than they are. So when they are in human body, they are not that hard. They are still pliable. They can mend itself. You can actually change the shape or size of bone also in a living cell, in a living body, but not when it's dead. Similarly, and our bones are also made up of calcium carbonate. So what is the one similarity which we share with cnidarians? That both their skeleton and our skeleton is calcium based. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So corals are also cnidarians. And write down cnidarians show two type of body forms. They have two body forms. By body forms, I mean, remember when I was teaching you about what I was teaching you? Where I told you that there is a gametophyte and a sporophyte as body?
Yes, sir.
Where was it? There is a gametophyte and there is a sporophyte. So gametophyte gives rise to sporophyte, sporophyte gives rise to gametophyte. So there are two forms of the body. Similarly, in cnidarians, there are two forms of the body. One is called polyp, the polyp form, and the other is called the medusa form. Polyp and medusa. These terms are used for forms of body. Okay. Now it's not like every organism has both the forms. Here it is different. Either you will have a polyp form or a medusa form. Now, what do you mean by polyp and medusa? Let me tell you. A polyp form, a medusa form, it looks like word M. Okay. This is how I remember it. So if you have a body form, which is like this, so you have tentacles, which merge, and you have a body. Looks like a starfish, no?
Yes, sir.
But it's not a starfish. Okay. It is called Aurelia. It is a cnidaria. It has stinging cells here and here. Do you think that this body looks like a M?
Yes, sir.
These kind of body forms are called medusa body forms. Okay, either the shape is like medusa form, and in polyp it's inverse. So you have tentacles on the top, okay, and then you have main body like this with a central cavity. Here also you have a central cavity. Here also you have a central cavity. So polyp is just inverted form of medusa. Will you remember this?
Yes, sir.
And for this as an example, remember I showed sea anemone above. Sea anemone is like, this is attached to a base. There is a mouth or a hypostome. There is a central cavity, and there are lots of tentacles arising. This is called a sea anemone. The scientific name of a sea anemone is called Adamsia. So Adamsia is an example of a polyp form, whereas Aurelia is an example of a medusa form. Will you remember? Is it easy to understand this way? Medusa
Yes,
forms.
sir.
Yes.
So this is how I remember it. I remember it for my entrance as well. Okay. So polyp and medusa are the two forms. And about these forms, if something is polyp, that most of the time it is sessile. What I mean by sessile is it is attached to something. Remember I told you here, look here. So it's attached to a base here. So it stays there and just keep waving like this. It keeps gliding like this. So the tentacles keeps moving, and anything which is edible comes in contact, it just stings it and it holds it and brings it into the hypostome. Is it clear? So if you see Nat Geo or these Discovery underwater pictures, you will see a lot of you will see a lot of sea anemones. They will be just gliding like this in water. They look very pretty. And when fish which are not in symbiotic relationship with them, if something like a fish which they can eat, or something, a shrimp or any other food material comes, they just sting it and holds it and eat it. But they are sessile. Sessile meaning attached to a substrate. Attached to substrate. Whereas if something is like this, medusa, Aurelia, looks like starfish, do you think it is sessile? It is free living, right? It can swim freely like a starfish. Make sense? Sorry, like a jellyfish. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
So the medusa form is not sessile, write down, it is free living. It's also, the medusa is also called umbrella shaped sometimes. Again, makes sense. It's look like an umbrella, right? So it's free living. It can just float in the water and go anywhere, and again sting something, hold it and eat it. Okay, what else is important? Aurelia sometimes commonly is called jellyfish, okay? But remember that when we say something jellyfish, we have to figure out whether it's a Cnidaria, like it can sting. If a jellyfish can sting, it comes under the category of Aurelia, and it is a medusa. There are jellyfishes that do not sting, but for your entrance and for your exam, I think just remember Aurelia as jellyfish, because this is what books also say. But just know for higher knowledge that all jellyfish, just like jellyfish is a term, just like birds is a term, right? Bird. All birds are not sparrows, right? All birds are not eagles, vultures, things. They are birds. Jellyfish are the fish, jelly-like fish which float. All of them are not Aurelia, but we call Aurelia commonly as jellyfish. Is it clear, everyone?
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. Now, there is one very interesting thing between this is called it's called alternation of generation. This is shown by, so that's why I wanted to explain this to you. I don't know if it's in your NCERT or not, but just write down, this is a very special feature that is asked a lot of times. It is called alternation of generation, where the word alternation means alternate. It comes from the word alternate. What do we mean by alternate? Alternate. Hello? Wake up, people. Alternate. What is the alternate of a petrol? solar power, right? Alternate is something which
Yes,
is
sir.
not the same, an alternative. Okay. So alternation of generation means cnidarians sometimes, like most of the times, are if there are multiple species which are present as polyp form, but they can alter their generation, and in the next generation, instead of polyp, they will become a medusa form. They will remain the same species. Okay, they will just invert their form and will attach to a substrate. Very interesting, isn't it? Right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So in one generation, you wanted to be free living. You were free living. You were Aurelia. You started going to places. You explored the nature, and then you got tired. You were like, oh, this nomadic life is of no use. Let me settle down. So they can actually do this. They can take this advice seriously. They can convert their form, and in the next generation, they can become a medusa. They can become a polyp, and they can attach to a substrate and stay stationary, right? So this is called alternation of generation, where a polyp form can form a medusa form, and the medusa form can form a polyp form. So write down, in alternation of generation, which is also the term which is asked in entrance is is this metagenesis. Is the term. Metagenesis is alternation of generation, and metagenesis is shown by cnidarians. Write down, where polyp produces medusa, and also there is one more catch. If a polyp, which is a stationary form, is deciding to produce medusa in the next generation, it does this asexually. You have to do this asexually. This is also an interesting point. And if a let me just, yes, asexually. And if a medusa, okay, has to become a polyp, it has to do through a sexual mode. So it has to be a sexual reproduction. Okay. Now, how to remember this? So I also had a catch to remember this. So polyp into medusa, like from stationary, sessile to free living, is asexually, because this medusa is the sexual partner. Like this can undergo sexual reproduction more. And also our gametes are free living, like our gametes can move. Sperms are motile, remember?
Yes, sir.
So just remember, gametes are motile. So to become motile and to become sexual, what you were earlier? Asexual, right? Polyp was asexual, so it can only reproduce asexually to give rise to medusa. And then medusa now, because it's free living like a sperm, that is the analogy I remember it with. Now medusa can undergo sexual reproduction to again become asexual and form polyp. Do you also think biologically why it is relevant? It is relevant biologically because sometimes there is lot of nutrients and good environment around us, right? So in that case, you would like to be stationary around that nutrient rich zone. Make sense? You mark your territory. You go and attach to a substrate which is full of nutrient and stay there, eat, flourish, ask some fish to come and clean for you, be happy. Then there is scarcity of resources, and now you need to move away. Then you do asexual reproduction, become medusa, become free living, go somewhere else. Again, if you see some very good habitable zone, become stationary. Do you make sense?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
So this is the biological relevance. So remember, polyp to medusa asexual and medusa to polyp is sexual. And one medusa form which very much does this polyp alternation is called obelia. It's an example. I don't know if it is asked or not. It will be asked or not, but just know it. Obelia is one medusa form which undergoes polyp alternation a lot. People have studied it a lot. And in the end, I think this is all that you need to know. Reproduction, digestion we got. Fertilization we do not need to know in this case. But if someone asks you, okay, I'll just go through. I think that's all you need to know. Oh yes, examples. Examples are always important, which are asked. So some important examples of economic and biological value is your Physalia is one. Physalia has a very unique name. It is called Portuguese man of war. I don't know why, but Physalia is called Portuguese man of war. That's why, and it's a Nidaria which is mostly used. Then I already told you about sea anemone, which is known as sea anemone. And the scientific name is Adamsia. Physalia, Adamsia. And yes, there is one thing. So all these have unique names. One has a name called sea pen. Look like a pen in the sea. And the scientific name is also starting with pen. It's called Pennatula. Rest you see. Look into your NCERT. These three are major. And there must be some examples like sea pen. There's another sea fan. Sea fan. Please go and look at its scientific name. I don't remember it. And another interesting is brain coral. These are the corals which look like brain. Have you seen the structure of brain?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
It's look like it has two hemispheres, right? Brain looks like this. This is how brain looks like. Right?
Yes, sir.
Walnut also looks like brain sometimes. This is called a brain coral. Okay, looks like brain. Again, don't remember its scientific name. So this and this, go and look for the scientific name. Will you? If you don't
Yes,
find
sir.
it in NCERT, you will find it online. So these are some major examples. That's all. You have to study for this phylum. Okay. Let me complete Ctenophora also. It's a small phylum. Ctenophora is not asked much because Ctenophora is in a lot of accords. It's like Nidaria, and it was actually a part of Nidaria only. Later on, people started figuring out, marine biologists, that there are some kind of jellyfish-like organism which sting and others which do not sting. Okay, so they just removed ones that do not have nidoblasts or cnidarians, and they cannot be called, they do not have nidocytes, and then put it into Ctenophora. Now what Ctenophora can do is, Ctenophora can show a special characteristic, which I'll tell you. So let's start with phylum 3 and we'll end at phylum 3 here, and which is your Ctenophora. Now, Ctenophora again, they are commonly called sea walnuts. I have not seen a Ctenophora in my life, so I don't know if it looks like a walnut or not, but they're called sea walnuts, and they are also called comb jellies. Now, this I can tell you why. So they are like jellyfish. Okay, again, a jellyfish look like this. It has a top part inflated like an umbrella. Okay, and from where there are two things coming out, right? Like this. You must have seen something like this, right?
Yes, sir.
They are called comb jellyfish because in this they have hair-like structures coming out. What does this structure looks like?
Celia.
Okay. What do you use to? Yes, it looks like comb, right? That's why They are called comb jellyfish or comb jellies. Okay, comb jellies and sea walnuts are the common name. Comb comes from because of this arrangement of their tentacles. Now, we cannot call it tentacles. They can only be used for locomotion, but not for capturing prey effectively because they cannot sting. They don't have stinging cells. Okay, but what they have is they have bioluminescence. This is very special. Now, what is bioluminescence? Bio means
Live.
living or life, right? And luminescence means ability to glow. Have you seen these fireflies? Fireflies
Yes,
glows in the dark, right? Their body produces light energy. It's like they're called fireflies as if they are lit on fire. Similarly, there are many organisms deep in the sea which can actually glow. So they use chemical energy to produce light from their own body, within their own body. There are very interesting comb jellies or comb jellyfish which actually show a lot of light. They can actually produce light, and this light is called bioluminescence. So write down the property of a living organism, the property, and this is the characteristic feature of Ctenophora, which is not present in cnidarians. The characteristic feature of cnidarians is cnidoblasts. For Ctenophora, it's bioluminescence. Write down, it's the property of a living organism to emit light from within its body. To emit light from within its body. Okay, so ctenophores can glow in the dark. Okay, and they are not just reflecting light like cat eyes. Cat's eyes also glows in the dark, right? But that is not bioluminescence. You understand that the difference between bioluminescence and cat eyes glowing? Cat eyes glowing is because of internal reflection of light. They are reflecting the light which is present in the surrounding, even if it's very faint. But if you put cat in a complete dark room which has no light at all, it will not be able to show glowing of the light. Maybe to some extent, which the light which was already present in the eyes, but it does not show effective bioluminescence. But these organisms, they are present very deep in the sea where no light can go inside, so they have to make their own lights. Also, there are fish. There are big predatory fish which looks like this. So they have a big jaw with a lot of teeth and a big head and a smaller body, and on the top of their head they have a tentacle like thing which comes out of their head, and at the top of it they produce light, and they do not have eyes, or even they may be having eyes. Sorry, they have eyes. The ones that do not have eyes are called cave fish. So these are predatory fish. Now look at this structure. Looks like it's very intelligently evolved in biology, where if you shine light, if you are like, it's like they are having a tentacle out of their head which is glowing. Now it glows to an area where this area is lit, but the fish is not visible. So small predators get attracted towards the light, right? So a small fish is attracted towards the light and comes here and starts figuring out what is this. And just when it is doing this, this big predator goes and engulfs and eats it. It's like luring through light and then eating the fish. Isn't it very interesting?
Yes,
Isn't it?
sir.
Yeah, right. So this is ingenious ways of in biology. So bioluminescence is one such thing. Okay. And again, Ctenophora is radial symmetry. It is diploblastic. It is aquatic, mostly marine. Everything same as cnidarian. So just write it down again. Radial symmetry, aquatic, mostly marine, free living, and diploblastic. All these features are same. And sexes are not separate. Sexes are not separate here. If sexes are not separate, they are hermaphrodites. Remember, sexes in the same body, hermaphrodite. But even if they are hermaphrodite, their sexual organs are designed in a way where they cannot do self-fertilization. So all they have to rely is sexual means, and most of the time it's cross-fertilization. So write down, reproduction is only sexual. No asexual mode is there. It's only sexual, and even in sexual, it's mostly cross-fertilization. And the fertilization is cross because it's external. They are more like fish in this manner. External fertilization. So both male and female swim close to each other and release their egg and sperm in water, and sperm fertilizes the egg in the water, which is external fertilization. And if fertilization is external, most of the times when fertilization is external, the development is direct or indirect. There will be a larval stage, or directly there will be indirect, right? Remember that direct development is mostly in those cases where the fertilization is internal. Okay, not a true thing, but more it follows a trend. But external fertilization, indirect development. Okay, and examples. I don't remember any. Oh, this one. This comb jellyfish is known as Pleurobrachia. 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 Pleuro means many. Brachia means branch-like structures. So there are many branch-like structures coming from this one ribbon-like thing. Like they are pleurobrachia. This is one. Try to find more examples. Okay. This phylum is not asked much, because the only thing asked is bioluminescence, this comb-like structure, and everything else is just like Cnidaria, apart from Nidoblasts. Is it clear, everyone? These three phylums, yes, is it clear to all of you? And will you be able to remember the highlights?
Yes.
So I try to break down every phylum in as simple manner as can, with some examples. As we will go further, the examples will become more familiar and natural to you, because you do not live in water, so you are not familiar with jellyfish and all these organisms. So spend some more time on the phylum and the kind of organisms you don't know much, because they are asked more. Because if you have to make the paper tough, you ask something which is not a common knowledge. That is a general rule. Okay, that is a thumb rule. So in the next class, we'll start with phylum 4, and I declare the class today at this point only. So any questions, anyone? Any doubts? Any questions you want to ask? No? Okay. So good night, and we'll meet in the next class. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So from now onwards, we'll be having one more class.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. And you will be notified about it. So just join when you are asked to. Okay. Good night. Bye bye.
Okay, sir. Good.